Hello, good morning.
Hello, good day. That's Alexandra, technical specialist. How do you hear us? Is everything okay?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly.
Yeah,
Hope
perfect.
our
We can
sound is
hear you.
audible there too.
Okay, okay. We can see you and we can hear you. As far as I remember, there is no presentation from your side, only speech. Okay, so please stay with us. Do not disconnect. We are going to start, I think, in 25 minutes. Now you may just mute your microphone and turn that on only when the moderator gives a word to you, just to exclude any extra noise.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. And by the way, don't you mind if we rename your account, or you may do it by your side, because there is a name like you should stay the name of your agency or maybe the name of the speaker. Is it possible to do?
Yes, it's possible. Yeah, if you want us to use the name of agency.
So how? Okay, I should use the name of the agency. Could show you my name. Yes. Okay, let me do that. Let me see if we can do that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Profile, view profile, which how do I put that? How do I do that?
Prosper, hello, good day. That's Alexandra, technical specialist. Do you hear us? Is everything okay? There is no sound from your side. I can see the video, but it's interrupting.
Actually, I muted the sound. Can you see the change in the name? Is it okay?
Yes, now we can see. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to mute my mic at this point.
Okay. Prosper, do you hear us? Hello? There is no video from your side. Could you please turn the video? We can see only the black screen of you. We just wanted to check the quality of video and sound, just like we did yesterday on the test.
Hello. Hello, ma'am.
Yeah, hello. We hear you, but we do not see you yet. Please switch off other programs on your mobile device.
It's Prosper.
Because, Prosper, we can hear you, but we do not see you yet. I think that your camera is working on another application.
You don't see me.
No, we do not see you. Please close all the applications on your device and stay only in Zoom. Oh, now we can see you. Yeah, that's the video, but it's interrupting. Could you please turn your camera horizontally, like we did on the test yesterday?
Oh, okay, this way. This way. Father, this way.
Your internet connection is very bad. That's why we hear you with interruptions and the video is not working well. Maybe you can find another internet connection.
Okay.
Unfortunately, your video didn't turn correctly because I think your function auto-tone, auto-reverse of your screen is not activated.
You still can't see me. You can see me now.
Yes, we can see you. And now try to turn your camera one more time.
Because when I turn it, it turns the other way around. Let me ask someone, assist. Magab, I'm trying to turn my camera. Yeah, they wanted to do a lens script, but saying the network is not that good. Yeah. Well, Anja Junior. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? Keep on. Ale vela ngiyi-trust mangami ukuthi nje iyabensiza but izikhuluma. Lokho into lokho. Thank you. yazi ifoni lana wethu ngiyikhohlwe njani into eziningi zemisebenzi ive endisebenzisayo yona nxa kufunda ifoni but the efficient and this one iyangani iyathula nje ananzame ngafuna lokhu mboni
If like you are not in your own to do everything with it, you might get to know your problem. What is that? This is 1047. Where will you go? Don't forget it. Okay, the title of the program. Let me send you the. Yes, because what is happening here is inaugural lecture. It's fine. It will change immediately. Okay. Well, this is showing inaugural lecture. And time on the go. 10 minutes more. He said my voice is coming out on the streaming. Did you? No, the person must be playing for. He is moved up. Every person here confirmed that I'm not the person. Which voice you say you hear? Now what? Can you hear this? No. So can you hear what we are saying?
Yes, we can see that you reconnected to us. Do you hear us? Is everything okay?
Hello, ma'am. I've connected now.
Yeah, we can hear you well. Thank you.
It's okay.
Yes. Could you please try once again to turn your camera? No, it's still not working. But it worked yesterday.
It did. I'm really not sure what could be the problem.
No, that's your front camera.
Can it work this way?
I think that you should find the preferences of your camera.
Let's just go about it. Let's see settings. Because we are fully landscape. This is connectivity, right?
Hello, testing mic. Still muted. Mute and let's see. Testing mic 1 2 1 2 testing 1 2. Can you hear me? Can you hear? Are you hearing online?
Yes,
Hello.
we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, good day. Mr. Kamil Mansari, do you hear us? Please unmute yourself. Your microphone is muted. Please click on microphone on the toolbar.
Mine,
Yes.
Now, do you hear
mine
me?
is unmuted.
Now we can hear you. Thank you so much. Could you please specify if you have any power presentation for today, or it's just a speech?
Whom are you talking to? Me?
Yes. I'm technical specialist. I'm talking to you. Yes.
Yeah, I have a speech, yes.
Okay. Yes. Well noted. Thank you. Now you may mute your microphone, and we are waiting for the beginning. Please stay with us. Your camera should be working during our conference, so just for our colleagues from studio to see that you're with us and you're connecting, and that everything is okay. Thank you.
Fantastic, okay.
Thank you.
Dear colleagues, hello. We're going to start in a couple of minutes. So we're just going to wait for one more speaker and I think start in 1 or 2 minutes. All right, I think we're ready to start. Готовность 10 секунд. Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from Moscow, from Россия Сегодня International Media Group, founder of Sputnik News Agency and Radio, and RIA Novosti News Agency and Radio. Today we are here at the headquarters and at our International Multimedia Press Center. My name is Daria Nagovitsina. I represent International Cooperation Department. We are honored to host today's roundtable of media representatives from Russia and Africa, titled Anti-colonialism in Modern Journalism, the role of media in decolonizing narratives. This event is timed to coincide with UNESCO's Global Media and Information Literacy Week, an important initiative promoting media literacy, cultural understanding, and dismantling of harmful narratives. With me here in Moscow is Chimauche Mwasu, correspondent from the United Directorate of Foreign Broadcasting, Sputnik News Agency and Radio, Россия Сегодня Media Group. Joining us online are distinguished media Ali Muhammad Ali, Managing Director of the News Agency of Nigeria, Ngala Hansel Venda, Editor at the Cameroon News Agency, Kamel Mansari, Publishing Director of June Independent in Algeria, and Prosper Ndlovu, National News Editor at Zim Papers, Zimbabwe. Today, we will explore the power of journalism to challenge colonial stereotypes and to elevate authentic voices rooted in history, culture, and rights of people worldwide. Our first speaker is Prosper Ndlovu, National Desk News Editor at Zim Papers, Zimbabwe. The role of media in combating the legacy of colonialism. Please, Prosper.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Greetings. It's still in the afternoon here in Zimbabwe. I would share a little bit of perspective from my country experience, given the little time that I have. I'll start by maybe giving a little bit of background, because Zimbabwe's experience in terms of combating colonialism, it's something that began in pre-independence times. During the liberation struggle days, you will realize that in the early days of the liberation struggle, when nationalist consciousness began with the leaders that began the fight against colonialism in around 1950s, 1960s, intensifying in the early 1970s, there was a realization that colonial media was being used to ideologically subjugate the black majority, the masses in Zimbabwe, and actually sideline the nationalist sentiment from the national agenda in terms of liberation discourse. So at that time, out of that consciousness, nationalists started challenging the biased media coverage of that time in favor of whites. And the blacks, those people who were trying to raise consciousness on nationalism and seeking independence, they were sidelined and actually vilified, labeled derogative terms as terrorists and people who were anti-progress. And these kind of colonial narratives justified the brutal treatment and actually punishment of nationalists from that standpoint. So you realize that even public media at that time, the Rhodesian broadcasting, and even on the print side, the Zim Papers group, which I work for, was under the colonial government at that time. And the narratives that were churned out were anti-independence, anti-nationalist, as it were. So this was the situation. The media then perpetrated the supremacy of the white colonial masters, and the blacks were actually reduced to lower levels. They were not even depicted as people who can lead, people who can actually have equal rights to the whites. So the media really played a critical as an ideological tool of oppression against the masses. So this is the background that I wanted to share. But out of that realization, you see that during the struggle itself, nationalists, black nationalists tried to use media. Of course, there were print publications that they started to try and share nationalist news and encourage people to be part of the struggle. And some of it were media products that were coming from foreign players, those countries that were independent, the broadcasting through shortwave and these other means. But from the national mainstream media, you wouldn't find anything nationalistic because the colonial masters didn't permit that. So coming into independence now, in the post-independence era, there was a drastic shift in the narrative from a media standpoint, because at independence in 1980, when Zimbabwe got its independence, the government took over the ownership of entities that were even owned by the Rhodesian colonial government. So the print side, this is where our own media group, the Zimpapers Group, was born. It's called Zimpapers 1980 Limited because it's a media house that was born out of independence. So narratives changed even from a broadcasting point of view. The narrative changed. Now blacks were in charge and the narratives were now different. They were now pro-black as it were. And this opened quite a lot of opportunity for the majority of black people who now went in to be managers and be journalists, be reporters from the new media that had been created. So you realize that after independence, there was a big shift and things were actually different from a socio-political standpoint. However, the colonial legacy remained strong on economic front because the minority white sector still controlled the economy. They ran the companies, they controlled mining. Their voice was dominant on the economic front. No wonder why when Zimbabwe, around 2000 there, Zimbabwe touched a storm, what I would call a storm, when the country embarked on the land reform program. And at that time, the international media, which is pro-Western, which is biased to Western interests, really sprang into action and really tried to counter the land reform that was happening there. And we saw serious colonial interests at that time from an economic front. And since that time, most of us would remember that was the time when Zimbabwe was slapped with the sanctions, which have remained a debate up to now. So during this period, local media also tried to fight to combat the legacy of colonialism by trying to counter the international media narratives, which were against what was happening in Zimbabwe in terms of the land reform. So we really saw quite a battle between international media and the local media over what was happening in Zimbabwe. Of course, the Western media was biased against Zimbabwe, and local media tried to counter that and give a story justifying and explaining what was happening in Zimbabwe and rally the masses, galvanizate the masses towards supporting what was happening at that time. And if you realize narratives that have been happening in Zimbabwe up to now, this is the period when Zimbabwe has come at the top of the international agenda, so to say, even regionally, in terms of sanctions. And because of reporting coming from the media, Zimbabwe has been discussed even at regional level to an extent that right now you find SADC, the African Union, and even other international players, countries like China and Russia, being part of the advocacy to have Zimbabwe sanctions lifted and removed because of the adverse impact that they are having. So throughout all this historic process, pre and post-independent, we see quite an interplay of media advocating and pushing colonial interests, and media also trying to fight and combat the same agenda. So this is one of the typical examples that I would say from a Zimbabwean perspective has been a tipping point, one of the most debatable issues up to now. Like this month, if you realize the narratives in Zimbabwe, October has been declared a month of anti-sanctions, and there is a regional solidarity behind Zimbabwe, the SADC 25 October Anti-Sanctions Day. The African Union has also spoken. All these are issues that are happening out of the agenda that the media has set in trying to counter colonial legacy and supremacy in independent African states. So in brief, I would say the role of the media alongside diplomatic lobbying and targeted messaging has really seen the globe debating issues that are happening in my country from different perspectives, of course, but there is some light at the end, because we've now seen some kind of relaxation and loosening up of the tight grip with Western guys, removing sanctions bit by bit, but the entirety of the sanctions are still not yet removed, and that is why the lobbying is still there. It's no longer Zimbabwe's lobbying, but it's now a regional issue. So I would end with the highlight of the polarization, of course, that is there in Zimbabwe. You wouldn't expect everyone to be one-sided. There is polarization. There is media coverage that is not pro what governments are doing, that is not pro what Zimbabwean authorities are doing. And some people would label that as the pro-colonial narrative, especially coming from independent or private media houses. So there is that issue of polarization, but media has really played a critical role in trying to combat the legacy of colonialism, especially public media, versus the national interests that Zimbabwe is focusing at the moment. I think this is what I would say briefly with the limited time that I have. Maybe we'll share more and explain further should time allow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prosper, for shedding light on how African media can reclaim the authority in the narrative making and challenging historic misrepresentations. Can you maybe name one concrete action that Zimbabwean media can do on the daily basis to challenge deep-rooted colonial stereotypes in reporting?
One example. I would give an example. One of the good typical examples in Zimbabwe is the issue of economic empowerment. You know, before independence, the colonial narrative or media had given an impression that blacks will always be workers who don't own businesses. They always need to look to whites for employment, whites to run the companies and manage. In Zimbabwe, through what we're discussing today, Zimbabweans have become bold people to actually take over the reins in terms of running the economy. The majority of Zimbabweans have been empowered to run companies, be managers in companies, and some of this boldness and determination has come out of narratives and messaging that is coming out even from our leadership to the people to say, let's stand up and actually defend our country, be ourselves who run issues and take charge of our destiny.
Thank you very much. I now present Kamil Mansari, Head of News at June Independent Algeria. He will talk about resources for decolonizing journalism and Western narratives. Please, Kamil. All right, I think Kamil is experiencing some sort of technical issues. Next, I will present Malam Ali Muhammad Ali, Managing Director of the News Agency of Nigeria. who will present Decolonizing the Script, Journalism as a Tool for Liberation. Please, Mr. Ali.
Well, thank you. Good morning from Nigeria. Good morning, everyone here. I'm delighted to be part of this engagement. Let me quickly express my appreciation and thanking the Russia Sokodia International Information Agency, the organizer of this very important roundtable, to speak on this raging issue of the media and the effort to decolonize narratives. So once again, thank you very much. At this stage of the evolution of many nation states in the global south, focusing on how media can help change age-old colonial narratives is a very worthwhile venture. It is imperative engagement if we must deploy the power of journalism to redefine our worldview. You know, after decades of journalism practice through the prisms of forces of occupation, a refreshing breath of fresh air is blowing across many parts of the global south, thanks largely to the new storylines defined by indigenous nuances and framing. You know, in the past, it's always Africa and colonial states are always presented as places of gloom, despair. It's all about gloom and doom in Africa, Asia, and other parts of the global south. But new voices are amplifying fresh perspective of our persona and those stories which matter to us, quite unlike in the past. Today, the various genres of journalism are becoming veritable tools of decolonization, throwing up immense possibility for our kind of storytelling. In Nigeria, the media has always been a staunch ally of anti-colonial forces, a torchbearer of national discourse, and a catalyst for social change. Today, our reportage continues to evolve, challenging Western-inspired narratives and spurring meaningful engagement. You know, studies of political development in Nigeria from the colonial to the post-colonial periods never fail to highlight the valiant roles the Nigerian media played in galvanizing popular support for major defining issues of the times. Historically, the Nigerian media and stalwarts of the Nigerian media from pre-independent to post-independent Nigeria, they have always tried to tell the story from the local indigenous perspective. And they fought colonial forces to the hilt. And like most of us here from Africa know, in the days of yore, pre-independent nation states, we have the likes of Pan-Africanists, the likes of Herbert Macaulay, Nnamdi Azikiwe, who championed and challenged colonial forces at every turn, especially colonial media. If, as early as the turn of the 19th century, the likes of Herbert Macaulay, they founded stereotypes. Now, Nigeria, today, 65 years after independence, our reportage is diligently reinventing itself. Like I said, challenging Western-inspired narratives and spurring these social changes. The question is, how are we doing that? What are we doing to challenge this? Like you know, Nigeria, and indeed most of West African nations, and indeed the whole of Africa, we're fiercely proud of our heritage, our cultural heritage. And one way we do this, fighting, decolonizing African narratives, is focusing on indigenous perspective and local framing of issues, thereby reclaiming the narrative. When you focus on the indigenous and the framing itself, how you frame the story away from colonial perspective, that's when you also, in the process, decolonize the narrative spun by Western media, by colonialists. Many Nigerian platforms are also decolonizing the script through language use and cultural imagery. And this is crucial. Notwithstanding the forces of colonialism, what they have done over time to first replace indigenous language with foreign language, and thereby controlling the thought process of most African narratives, Africans. What we do, the Nigerian media, what we've done post-independent is to decolonize the script, like I say, using local language and using also cultural imageries, quite unlike the past, you know. As part of the decolonization initiatives, for example, at the News Agency of Nigeria, which I lead, which I'm privileged to lead, we have launched our local language website, starting with one of the most widely spoken language in the West African sub-region, that is Hausa. It's spoken across a lot of West African nation states. One account said over 70 million speak that language. Just like Swahili in Central Africa and some parts of, I think South Africa, if I'm right, in Ndolobo. I'm sure perhaps you know of Swahili. Now, approximately over 750 million Nigerians out of 200. And Hausa is a non-ethnic language, I must add. It's spoken by a lot of other people who are not native to, not native speakers to Hausa. NAN also initiates websites for other local languages, such as Yoruba, widely spoken also in Nigeria. One of the three major languages you have in Nigeria, Yoruba, Igbo. So with these three indigenous languages spoken across Nigeria, and some of them across, beyond the shores of the Nigerian state, we're publishing these languages. One important critical element in decolonizing African journalism is also media ownership. Now, we have, you know, like I said from the beginning, the likes of Herbert Macaulay historically, for who, more than 100 years ago, challenged colonial stereotypes. Later on, the Zik, Nnamdi Azikiwe, the first president of Nigeria, who himself was a journalist. In the fight against colonialism, Zik of Africa, as he was then called, founded the West African Pilot that provided a platform for other nationalists to also use that platform. The West African Pilot was used by nationalists such as Awolowo, even Ahmadu Bello, to express deep, patriotic expressions and to galvanize national opinion and shape forces, anti-colonial forces. So media ownership we have in contemporary times in such media giants like Induka Obaibena, who one of the owners of the largest media outlets in Nigeria. They're indigenous, in print and also broadcast. We have the likes of John Momo, Kabiru Yusuf, and these are emergent young talks made of startups, like I said, and independent journalists using blogs. There are other independent journalists using blogs, podcasts, and YouTube channels to create content, which do not need Western validation. We have a very thriving independent also content creators. As I close, let me remind us that one of the important takeaways from an important forum such as this is the need to sustain the current tempo of telling our stories on our own terms. By diligently and persistently doing this in our own little corner, we will have succeeded in helping to create a more just and equitable world. I thank you very much for this opportunity once again to share my thoughts on this very compelling theme as the role of the media in decolonizing narratives. And ultimately, for us in this career path is to own our storylines, to own them, and then to tell them regardless of perception by colonialists and colonial masters. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali, for such an inspiring example of media's role in liberation and social change. For us, it's very crucial to raise this question of integrating local languages into broadcasting, because our Sputnik Africa team also broadcasts in Swahili and Amharic. So my question to you is, could you please share some tips to local media on how to integrate local languages into broadcasting?
How to integrate local, most local media here are actually, because they want to reach those at the bottom of the social ladder. If you take the radio, if you know the topography of Nigeria, you will say that there are three major languages widely spoken. Of course, there are other languages. In Nigeria, we have plus minus about 200 ethnic languages. But then there are one common, in the southwest, for example, Yoruba is widely spoken in the southwest. Now, in the north, Hausa is widely spoken. And Hausa, like we said, commands a very large followership. So for you to reach local media, especially the radio, they rely on these local languages to pass on their stories, to tell their stories. However, the snag here is sometimes stories are also sourced from international agencies, media organizations. Up until recently, if you want to get to know what's going on, for example, in Russia, for example, the conflict going on currently between Russia and Ukraine, sometimes we rely on AFP, for example, to tell the story. And sometimes we all know how such media organizations tell the story through their own prism. Now, in framing the story in indigenous languages, like I said, we also use cultural imagery, something that will sit. No reason why each time, for example, you use the word, for example, let me give you a common example, what they refer to as the black market. The black market is a universal language for the dark side of business. Really, in the indigenous language, you find a way to reframe that to reflect something that is totally at variance with this very popular expression to describe an illegal market, you know. And in doing that, also, like we said, the local language has, the indigenous languages, they have their own idioms, their idiomatic expression, their syntax, if you must, their synonyms, their antonyms. Apart from, for example, English or French even, or any of the colonial languages bequeath Africa. This is what we do. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you very much for
Yeah, I have one question for you, Mr. Ali. By the way, I'm Nigerian.
Oh, you are?
So, yes.
Thank you.
So, I've listened to all you explained and said, and they were spot on. So, but there is a problem, you know, that is quite subtle and very difficult to notice, which is when, let's say, some Western media organizations operating in Africa in indigenous languages use subtle means to embed their narratives to the local population, preying on the unsuspecting listeners who, by default, you know, start thinking or gravitating towards such narrative. Let me just give an example. We all know that the issue of insurgency, you know, is caused by a whole lot of factors, climate change, and the rest of them. So we have now seen how they have projected that issue of insurgency, you know, to paint it to make Nigeria look like a state that is, you know, being ravaged by insurgents, instead of trying to localize it to a small geographical location where that particular problem is. What do you have to say about this?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Nwosu. It's good to have a fellow Niger over there and then tell the story from a different perspective. And that's a very good question there. And this is something that we've been battling. I just returned from Moscow with the media at the instance of the Ruskimir Foundation and TV Bricks. I'm just saying this by way of information. And it's a question I've been asked at that forum. The perception, why is it that the local, the foreign media, especially, take for example the BBC. Let's address this elephant in the room. The BBC,
exactly.
The BBC, which is consumed by a large number of the product, the news content of BBC over the years has come to be trusted by a large number of Hausa native speakers. They think the BBC tells the story, tells the gospel truth, and they believe that. And in the process, they set in their agenda subtly, like you rightly pointed out. Now, with the coming of the digital age, and this is why it gets interesting, because we have instances where people are now countering such narratives, as subtle as they were, by the action of a few social media, I don't want to use the expression, bloggers, influencers, who are challenging such narratives. And again, who also have a totally different understanding, because media now, with the coming of the digital age, media space has been democratized. Virtually everyone now thinks they are journalists. There is always a counter narrative to whatever narrative is pushed out there. So for now, people are also questioning such media organization. When they tell stories, they can easily detect where they try to sell an agenda or why they try to set an agenda. And this is the benefit of the digital age, which, like we say now, boundaries have been totally incinerated. No boundaries now. The media space is completely open, courtesy of the digital age. But it's very important now, at a time like this. Take, for example, the recent classification of Nigeria by some United States politicians as a state where there is a genocide against a certain faith. I don't want to be specific, but you see, people are challenging that. Even in the state, people are challenging that. Now, the media also that ordinarily would have been used to amplify that position is now on the defensive. Not too long ago, the head of BBC Hausa Service here in Nigeria, and for your information, the BBC Hausa Service broadcasts from Nigeria. Can you believe that? They are broadcasting by indigenous people, but the agenda, I mean, the framing of the story has always been Western. And nothing could be more insidious than you have native speakers framing the story in the local language, framing the story through the prism of Western colonial forces. Nothing could be more insidious, but also at the same time, because of digital media, people are challenging that position almost instantaneously. Because the media space is now more interactive, as you broadcast, people are already giving you feedback. Those who follow your live feed, they're interacting and challenging such opinions. I remember one clear example of misrepresentation by such media organization, I think also related to this broadcast in Hausa in local language. They reported an event that happened in the Northeast. Almost instantly, at the moment, some people countered that narrative by saying, look, we are there, we are here on the spot. This is not true. What you reported is false, it's not true. And over time, credibility begins to wear out. Such media organization now, unlike in the past, some 15 years ago, what they sent, the broadcast is taken as the gospel truth. But now people are resisting. You know, propaganda only works when you are credible, when people believe you. But the moment they begin to challenge that, look, then you've lost that credibility. And in journalism, to lose your credibility is a death nail. Nobody believes. The moment you lose that credibility, then you cease to be influential, you cease to shape public opinion, you cease to persuade people to believe your storylines. Yes. Mozu?
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. I now present Kamel Mansari, Head of News at June Independent, Algeria. Please tell us what resources are there to decolonize journalism and Western narratives. Kamel, the floor is yours.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I really enjoyed listening to my friend Muhammad Ali from Nigeria. We met many times in South Africa and Sao Paulo and recently in Kunming in China.
Thank you. I didn't recognize you.
Always a pleasure to listen to him, to his speeches. Anyway, we here in Nigeria, we have almost more than 210 media outlets in various languages, and two languages, French and Arabic, and we have some few media outlets using English, but the majority of the media in Nigeria are using the Arabic language. It's mainly population choice, because there is still this tension between Algeria and France because of colonialism. So more people are reluctant to speak French, but they go to Arabic and English. We have the young generation here in Algeria is mostly speaking in English, and it is really amazing how student has switched from French to English, and this is make the French media or French representative very angry at that. They don't like it because they think the language is the tool to keep on the pressure, the presence, and the culture and influence on Algeria. Anyway, I would like to address the issue of the colonization on media. I would like to expose some factual elements that have shaped the editorial orientations of the Western mainstream media based on political diktats. You see, has been a huge challenge to us as journalists, especially when dealing with the 9/11 events in 2001, and how this shaped the policies and how this shaped the media narratives from that time until today. And it's practically the same narrative, the same orientation given to the media Western. We here in Algeria have faced that, because when you are described and framed as a Muslim at that time, it is equal to terrorism. So even when you are speaking to the embassies or trying to get a visa, you are always framed, and it is difficult to get it to go to Europe, because you are a threat to the. As journalists, we suffered from that for a great deal, and so the colonial coverage, narrative coverage, what is happening with us is very problematic, and we had to try to find sources to deal with the news all around the world. So let me just give some example, because let's see what's happened with the Iraq and how the Russian massacres that has been depicted in Ukraine, which is fake. We had to deal with that many times. And let me just go back to the example, the factual example. Let me see that the impact of the 9/11 on around the world was tremendous. So no one could in the Western mainstream media question the official narratives. To this day, scientists, experts, and investigation journalists are raising questions over the news package sold to the world by the US administration on the aftermath of 9/11. And this has been a great problem for us. So if this religious question were red lines, so you cannot, for instance, question what happened in the Pentagon, what happened in Twin Towers. That was really impossible. And even when the war on terror became a war against Muslim, we remember the example of Iraq, the war of weapons of mass destruction, which was really fake news. We remember that they accused Iraq of possessing weapons of mass destruction, but at the end it became a fake news, and it became a sort of an alibi to occupy Iraq. I was in Iraq in 2004, and let me tell you that I have witnessed how the American army was brutal to the civilians. I covered, after 1 year of occupation, and I covered the situation over there, and I can tell you, as a witness, it was really horrible how everyone in Iraq was suspected as a terrorist. And this has been a problem to us, how to convince the Western that this is not true. But and at that time, internet was not as prosperous as it is today. And so the governments in the West are framing also ethnic and groups to impose via pressures a line of conduct. This is a geopolitical reality. Let's see, thus the Russians are stereotypes today, are stereotypes as fascist. Palestinians resistant to Israeli occupation is terrorism. And most recently, the Venezuela government is a drug smuggler. This is stupid. I mean, this is insane. How can a state become in 1 month as a drug smuggler? So therefore, the official narratives become top editorial choices, reflected in the style guide. The style guide is very important to analyze how everything in Europe, especially today, if you go to the TVs, you will see discussions about Algeria all through the time, every day, and we have on 1st November, probably most of you know that it is the celebration of our independence, our revolution for independence against colonialism in 1st of November 1954. So to this time, at this precise moment, A lot of talk shows in France are talking about how the French brought civilization to Algeria. They say we went there to bring civilization. You see how the narratives are bogged, are not reflecting the reality. Well, 132 years of colonialism has brought nothing, has brought misery, has brought spoliations, has brought massacres, has brought poverty to the Algerians. And I know that most of the African countries went through the colonialism in the same conditions, in the same humiliation, in the same savagery, and they call it civilization. I don't know if you remember what the French Minister of Colonies, Albert Soros, said. France has a civilizing mission and has a duty to spread French culture and values among its colonies. What culture, what values did we receive except poverty, humiliation, and massacres? This is this mindset is still rooted until today. So that's why the government or the official narratives are still talking about their sort of the good they did to us by bringing civilization, where they did not bring anything. The only thing that they brought is colonialism. Anyway, so now for the media in the West, the basic principle of both sides of the story is no longer relevant when manipulation is the code to cope with in the newsrooms. Because today, if you control the narrative, you control the newsrooms, you control the policy, and you control it. See today how the Palestinians are depicted as terrorists, and the Venezuelans the government as depicted as drug smuggler. The Russians are fascist. This is, if you manage to instill this as a theory, as a reality, now the lies become a truth. And this is why we have seen how the censorship and the double standard imposed to media like RT and Sputnik were subject to in 2022, represent a genuine example of how the Western media have imposed a one-side story. Well, it's not just the media, but the government over the Russian-Ukraine conflict. This has caused us as media a lot of, problem to collect and find unbiased reports about the conflict in Ukraine, because the censorship was very, very, very hard and very, very tough. And this is why now we rely on platforms like Telegram. We have to go and search in Telegram to find some serious and some reliable sources to write about the report in Ukraine, because most of the countries, most of the European media are focusing on Ukraine as it is something about an aggression, where in reality, if you go back to 2014, you will see that it was just like a coup was imposed to the Ukrainian population. And this is why we had to come back and remind people of the reality, as well as we remind the colonialists that Africa has been spoiled, has been savaged, has been massacred, has been spoiled from its resources until today. Unfortunately, there are some governments who are playing the game with the Westerns in Africa, which is sad in some part, but in reality, the global people, like the Pan-Africanists, are dealing with this situation, trying to give a new speech, a new narrative that reflects the reality and not just the narrative, the Western narrative problem. So I will finish by saying, because I believe it is relevant to explore a common strategy we need to create to ensure a constant exposure to our contents within the Global South media. The Global South media is a very, very interesting platform, basically in Africa, because the continent that has suffered a lot from colonialism and which is the most in need to decolonize the Western narratives. I believe that we may enrich a long-term cooperation by exchanging experiences, training. We had here in Algeria, especially in my newspaper, Le Jeune Indépendant, we have created a lot of trainings. We have launched a lot of trainings with companies, with Chinese, with some independent media about the fake news, and it is very important. So, training and online network will become a reference or a source when it comes to deal with our own issues. Our own issues has to be dealt by us, not by the Western. See what Muhammad Ali was talking about, what's going on in the north of Nigeria. We have dealt with Boko Haram situation, we have dealt with the terrorism and violence, but it is always depicted as a government that is violating or using violence against its own population, which is not true. Because there is a lot of interest in the north of Nigeria. There is a lot of oil in the north of Nigeria. And the American and other, like Britain, are trying to make pressure to force the Nigerian government in Abuja to cope with or accept their conditions to control the resources. Algeria and Nigeria are trying to build a gas pipeline that goes from Abuja to Algeria and then to export gas. And this has been, to this day, there's a campaign against it. So my belief is that we need to engage partnership between us to produce our own editorial style guide. To have an editorial style guide is very important. And we need to multiply the consultancy. We need to create a bridge, a constant and permanent bridge between us to arrive and reach the what we call an effective and practical journalism that will stop the Western narrative. I thank you very much, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kamil, for such an enlightening discussion highlighting how we can strengthen alternative media networks and for telling us how media can shift from a narrative follower to an agenda setter. So, is there a way for media practitioners to access and share resources to counter these dominant narratives?
Yes, we currently what we have is that we are mostly relying on other sources. We try to find out. Let me just explain. I gave the Ukraine Russia conflict, and we are trying to find out what other resources, because as long as it is difficult to go to YouTube, to go to any other sources to find. So we are looking for people like experts or going to Telegram to try to find out the reality, because if you listen to, the Western media are very dominant. They are powerful. They have money, they have the people, and they have the narratives, they have everything that consists in selling their reality. So that is why we rely on many other sources. Here we are aware, when you train people, when you tell them to be very careful, not to accept anything, because we are hammered 24 hours a day by AFP, by Reuters, by AP about what's going on all around the world in issues. You don't have the time, especially when you have to deal with TVs. You don't have the time to verify, to check. So what we do is we have created a team. We have a team, what we call them fact checkers in our newspaper. They are trained on a regular basis. So they check online, and they do not reproduce or reprint anything without checking it from independent sources. We work mostly with independent sources. The name of our newspaper is Independent, so we work with independent sources. If we need to get something about Nigeria, we go to some local sources. If we need something about Zimbabwe, we go to Zimbabwe and see if there is any voice or any media outlet that could give us at least 50% of the truth. This is how we act and how we work on daily basis. We have a very nice team that do that on daily basis. It is very hard. It requires a lot of training tools. We have partners that helps us. We have partnership with many media outlets, and I hope that we can create a partnership with Muhammad Ali, with New Jersey. We are open to that, just to exchange anyone else from Mr. Prosper. We can do that, and we are ready to help and reproduce the narratives that are 100% Africans. Thank you very much. Sorry, because I have to leave. I have a meeting, a very urgent meeting, because we are preparing, as I told you, the festivities, and we need to be very. There's a lot of work to do. Thank you for the invitation, Daria, and we keep in touch. Okay?
Thank you. Of course, we will have a great meeting. Following that, I invite Ngala Hansel-Venda, editor at Cameroon News Agency, to share on rethinking objectivity and the gift ethic, deconstructing Western journalism taboo on receiving gifts from sources in Cameroon. Please, Ngala.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Daria, for having me. Good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, so I don't know, I'll just do this in a conversational style. I wrote a little something, but I think it's best if I just talk. Yeah, so I think my topic, rethinking objectivity and the gift ethic, deconstructing Western journalism's taboo on receiving gifts, is quite topical. It means a lot to me because as a practicing journalist in Cameroon, I studied in South Africa and I worked in South Africa and Cameroon, and so I'm able to see clearly a lot of differences between the way journalism is practiced in both countries. And what stands out to me is in the Cameroonian context especially is the fact that journalists, after they cover an event, usually they have an expectation that they have to be given some kind of remittance for covering those events. It feeds into the broader culture in Western Central Africa, where I think my brothers in Nigeria can agree that normally we don't find it a problem that, in fact, people usually expect that after they visit a friend or a relative, that they should get some sort of kickback. And so, but when it comes to in the context of journalism, it kind of, there's a bit of a clash, where the Western perspective is usually that you are not allowed to receive gifts at all. But then what this does is that it ignores the broader economic realities in West Africa, where the reality is that most journalists don't earn much. In Cameroon, for example, the average salary that a journalist earns is about $100 US. That's very little when you put it into perspective, that someone has to pay their bills from this amount of money. They have to, even to cover events, they have to pay transportation to the office and back if they are working a 9-to-5 type of job. And so it's really not much to live on. And so from that perspective, I understand why journalists sometimes would feel compelled to want to take kickbacks from sources. But usually, like in the case of Cameroon News Agency, I think what we do is we limit this to just covering of press conferences, where, of course, it's already a public event, so there's nothing really fishy, going on, as opposed to maybe if you're undertaking an independent report and then maybe a source maybe now tries to offer you an envelope to kill that story. I think usually that would be a whole other ball game, where I think it would mean that you should think it on a case-by-case basis, really. If somebody's a public official and maybe they're offering you an envelope to sort of kill a story, do you go ahead and do it? And what are the repercussions for this? But if it's a press conference where it's an open thing anyway, and it's open to the public, there's really nothing secretive going on, I don't think there's any problem taking an envelope to cover your transportation costs, in quotes, as they usually put it. However, in the broader perspective of things, what happens is that most journalists have reduced journalism into something where they feel that they are entitled to always get money from sources, where, in fact, if they don't get money from a source, sometimes they decide to rather kill a story because they didn't get money for covering that particular story or whatever. And again, it goes back to the broader economic realities in which we're living. Journalism in Cameroon is not well funded. A lot of journalists don't know how to source for grants. A lot of journalists don't have insurance in the company, in the newsrooms or news organizations where they work. A lot of them don't have contracts even, and so they feel very vulnerable. And then you have like colleagues in the state-run media organ, the Cameroon Radio Television or CRTV, who, because they are state-owned, means that they have better economic prospects. And so, but that also comes with them towing a certain editorial line where they cannot say certain things independently. They always tend to sound pro-government, and they kill any stories that would make the government look bad. So everything it always seems to be like a compromise in one way or the other. If you're in the independent journalism sphere, you are independent and you can say whatever you want in a sense, but then it's easy for you to be a target. It's easy for you to also get your newsroom shut down, because most Cameroonian newsrooms still are, printing hard copy papers, although this is phasing out. And so most of them still run radio stations and TV studios and so on, which can easily be targeted by authorities. And so they find themselves in a complex spot where, in order to survive, they find themselves making a lot of compromises. Most journalists don't own equipment.
Right, I think we are experiencing some technical issues. While we are waiting for Ngala to reconnect, I will present our speaker here in the press center with me, Mr. Chimao Chimnwasu, correspondent with the United Directorate of Foreign Broadcasting at the News Agency. Please tell us what is decolonizing in the digital space? What opportunities for African media are there in this digital age? Please.
Thank you very much, Daria, for this opportunity. And to my colleagues who have just joined us online, I will say a special thank you for availing us your time to be on this special occasion. So my topic is decolonizing the digital space, opportunities for African media in the information age. So I would like to bring my focus on Africa.
Hello?
Okay, he has just joined.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Welcome back.
Oh. Okay, Mr. Norsu.
Okay, so let me just proceed then. So my first intro would be, why is Africa's digital space colonized? There are many factors that are attributable to this particular thing, which is one, digital infrastructure, digital platform dominance, data extraction, knowledge dependency, and weak data regulation. So let me start with the first one, which is digital infrastructure. We know that digital infrastructure like internet data cables that run through our ocean systems, data centers, cloud services are mostly offered by tech giants from the West. And what does this mean? This means that even if you want to, do something that has to do with media or playing the media ecosystem in Africa as a whole, there is one big lacuna, which is the information portal or medium which you are going to use to, serve the public is coming from the West, and which makes you dependent Then second aspect has to do with digital platform dominance. What do I mean by this? We have the likes of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, no, X, sorry, Instagram, TikTok, and the likes of it. These are also Western-based or Western-created platforms that are serving globally. And we have teeming subscribers numbering in billions, not even hundreds of millions of subscribers, and possibly hundreds of millions of active users monthly and daily. So what does this mean? This means that whatever content that comes out there, they give you visibility, and when they give you visibility, it translates to validity, which means they validate the narrative, they validate the content, they validate the language, they even validate how these things are put out there. And also, just to give it a little bit of tweak, on these social media platforms, for example, they have what we call demographic targeting, which means that they also control who consumes this content, in what geographical location, and how. So we can see that there is this kind of subtle but real issue that has to do with somebody giving you the platform, giving you the voice, and also controlling how you manage the platform and disseminate some particular types of information on the platform. Also, search engines, like Google and other Western-based search engines, they also control the narrative. For instance, you can, during the last presidential election in the United States, let me say, American media has it that if you put a search term that is about Trump, they automatically don't come up. But when you put a search term that reflects Biden or the Democratic Party, you see them in different forms and sizes. So there is this conscious campaign, just to ensure that they control the squeeze on Africa's digital space. Also, when they have this digital platform dominance, what it does is that it hinders the operationability of alternative platforms from Africa. For example, people don't know that after the 2000 and after what's the name of this owner of X? After Elon Musk took over from Jack Dorsey, in 2023 or so, if I'm not mistaken, there was this conscious campaign just to hinder some what they termed controversial tweets coming from African medias or digital space. And this led to creating platforms such as the Metatodon and Inchi, which is, the Inchi is an open source platform that, works like, how can I say, an opinion platform where people from Africa, especially within the Kenyan space, use their local language to communicate. It's like an opinion group or platform. So as we continue to see these kinds of manifestations in the present digital space, it gives room for concern. The other aspect or the other point I want to talk about is data extraction. African users generate massive data online, but data is stored, analyzed, and monetized in Western countries. And these mirrors colonial models of resource extraction. So, in as much as they say that African countries are independent, but colonialism or the vestiges of colonialism hasn't logged out on the continent. Then the next aspect I want to talk about is knowledge dependency, where they use algorithms, artificial intelligence models, and online education materials that are designed around Western knowledge systems, marginalizing African knowledge systems, languages, histories, and worldviews or perspectives. And what does this mean? They deny you the opportunity to really express and manifest whom you really are, what your particular contextual story is all about, and how you try to manifest or express some ideologies, from your own perspective rather than from a Western list or garnished perspective. So the last point I would like to talk about is weak data regulation. We know that all over Africa, since the turn of the 21st century, several African governments or several African countries have come up with different, data regulatory regimes. But the question is, in as much as they have these systems in place, the problem that makes the realization of these systems or making them not to take full hold is weak data regulation. And all this also hinges on infrastructure, as well as not trying to have a kind of harmonious regulatory system that takes or that tackles a particular problem or phenomena as we have in different African contexts. So I would like to talk about another topic that has to do with why decolonizing the digital space matters. So the first point I have here is it serves to preserve our culture. Local languages, traditions, and perspectives or worldviews thrive when digital tools reflect African realities. But in the present day African digital space, what do we have? I have come to realize, because in the course of several interviews with tech experts from different countries in Africa, there is one particular issue that is currently going on. If we check, for example, let's use Google, which most African internet users, go to when they want to source or score for information online. You will see that there is a particular pattern. Most African indigenous languages are not fully represented on this search engine. And that gives a kind of problem. Even if they are represented on this search engine, which I'm sure they are not, if you put a key term, let me say in Hausa language or Yoruba language or in Swahili, just to reproduce or to give you an answer that is related to that particular search or key term, you will understand that there is this kind of approximate feedback you get, which is not fully or what you anticipate to get as a feedback. So that creates a kind of problem. Another aspect is large language models, which we call LLMs, which are fed into AI use. You can see that even if you put, let's say, which the populous AI model we use today is ChatGPT. And then we have the likes of the Chinese version, or I've forgotten the name. So what happens is that there is no adequate representation of our local languages there. You can just see a select few, but in the vast swathes of Africa, we have, in Nigeria alone, we have over 250 languages. In Cameroon, we have more than. In Ghana, we have. In South Africa, in other South African countries like Zimbabwe, Namibia, Lesotho, South Africa itself, name it, Angola, they have their own indigenous languages. And we also have a burgeoning or a growing youth population or youth demography in Africa. So what does that mean? Internet penetration is on the increase. So when the local voices or channels to those using local narratives to explain or express a particular phenomena or how their worldview is, or a particular problem or a particular news item, you will see that it lacks the adequate language to fully express what that particular news item or article or phenomena is all about. So let me go to the next aspect of why decolonizing the digital space matters. So another point here is reclaiming narrative power. African voices often get filtered through Western platforms and algorithms. Decolonizing ensures stories are told by and for Africans. For example, I have made this allusion earlier regarding how Africa Twitter campaign gave rise to a regional community on open source social network called Mastodon Africa, built and run by Africans and for Africa. So the next one is information integrity. Information integrity helps reduce digital colonialism, where misinformation or biased systems distort how Africa is seen and understood. Example, currently in this year, earlier this year in 2025, in Libreville, Gabon, the Gabonese government, floated the Digital 2025 plan. Also, this week I spoke to one of the leading tech experts in Nigeria, because Nigeria, is inching towards establishing its own national data center. So if African countries become proactive in ensuring that they own and manage their own digital systems, we can see that the issue of dependency on Western-based platforms or Western-based ICT infrastructure will be well diminished. Then, that brings us to how African media can reclaim its agency. One, the first point to highlight here is we have to start building local digital infrastructure. Also, invest and support African-owned platforms, data centers, content distribution networks. For example, Nigeria, Ghana, Rwanda, South Africa are on the forefront of investing heavily on digital public infrastructure. Then we have to also prioritize indigenous narratives by ensuring storytelling is rooted in organic African contexts, languages, histories, lexicons, and as well as contextually, given the narrative, a kind of setting that doesn't make it to lose its taste of value over time, because in media we have what we call the lifetime value of a particular news source or piece. Then we have to also prioritize open source collaboration. That is by using and contributing to open technologies to foster autonomy and innovation. For example, the African Academy for Open Source Investigation equips investigative journalists and other media practitioners, as well as civil society organizations and NGOs, with open source intelligence tools to enhance their work. Then we have to also look at policy and regulation. So here, there is need for advocacy for fair digital trade, data sovereignty, and equitable access to digital markets. Example, the African Union Data Policy Frameworks, which aims to enhance data governance, digital ID across the African continent. Then, lastly, digital literacy and research, which is very crucial because our colleague from Algeria pointed out that there is need to train journalists and audiences to critically engage with algorithms, platforms, and media ownership structures. So to buttress further, also information silos, or let me say media silos or media voices, like we have through the means of long-form podcasts and other forms of information disseminating systems we have in the turn of this 21st century due to digital media. We can see that we can synergize, all these sources of media together to ensure that we have a kind of touchdown effect that really goes down to educate, inform, and enlighten the African audience. As we know, the indices, human development indices in Africa is always ranked low, not only in Africa, in the whole of Global South. They give it low numbers. So, and this has helped, like Mr. Ali said before, when you have a particular audience and you reach out to them in the language they understand, you buy their heart. But when, due to their literacy level, there are some kind of subtle embedding of narrative that doesn't really speak to the context or their reality, they also buy it in because they cannot decipher between what's an imposed narrative and an organically generated narrative. So with this, we can really stem this tide of colonized digital space. Then lastly, what opportunities are there for African media in the information age? First, global reach. We have seen that influencers, African influencers, and social media content creators, and also independent media practitioners have created blogs, created vlogs as well, and have also developed their own website in order to practice journalism, or as well as put out contents out there. So this has given voices to marginalized groups, communities, and those who have no means of putting out their own stories, their problems and challenges out there. Now, storytelling innovation. There are multimedia tools that can enable richer, more diverse storytelling, from podcasts to interactive contents, which we have today. So, and how can we innovate our storytelling? We can innovate our storytelling through sarcasm, through satire, through comedy. For example, when I spoke to one of Nigeria's TikTok sensations, Charity Eze, so about how she started using satire and comic content to dislodge or to dismember stupid stereotypes about Nigeria and the other African nations. She said that what inspired her was she went to one of the Western nations for a conference, and people were asking her, is it true that we live side by side with wildlife, whereby you can see lions and zebras and all that, walking on the street. So although the story or that engagement got her very angry, but she was able to, come back, think about how to, dispel such narratives and bring a kind of some innovative infusions in her storytelling, using satire, using comedy, using some kind of imagery, just to ensure that even the most illiterate of listeners or viewers or her audience can really get the message she's trying to pass. Then another aspect is cultural export. We can see that happening also, booming in the turn of the 21st century. I mean, African music, African film, African fashion, African literature are all gaining global recognition and influence. So another aspect is collaborative networks. So, online communities can foster partnerships across continents and with the African diaspora. Also, I will use this opportunity also to invite all of us to be part of the global fact-checking network, which has its roots here in Russia, which is a gathering or a conglomeration of international journalists, who stand for the truth without being biased and putting out the stories as they are. So lastly, I would like to point out advocacy and representation. Digital spaces can amplify underrepresented voices and challenge dominant narratives. So, gentlemen, gentlemen and lady, this is what I have to, deliver on my part, speaking on the topic that says decolonizing the digital space, opportunities for African media in the information age. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your insights, underscoring the importance of innovation and resilience in this evolving landscape. So my initial question to you was, should we create some kind of platform to get everyone together to work on these projects, as given that you have mentioned the importance of collaboration. But now I'm actually thinking, should we wait for this kind of collaboration, or should every one of us do what we can, like the blogger that you mentioned?
Well, we don't need to wait for collaborations. At least they said little drops, fill the cup or the bucket, as the case may be. We can start in our individual, with individual efforts, and as well as also find ways to collaborate or synergize our efforts with others who are in the field doing the same thing, as well as also expanding the scope and the capacity of our reach. For example, we can't fight, decolonization of Africa's media space alone or in silos. All we can do is we can come together, have a clear focus on what effects or bad effects has this had on the African population. I'm not limiting it to Nigeria, but on the African population, because what I can understand from practice so far is that whenever any Western agenda wants to be dumped on Africa, they do it with ease, and they use African agents to do whatever they feel like, and they go scot-free. So when we start challenging these subtle means of ensuring that we remain under the chains of, or under the shackles of colonialism, we should ask ourselves one question. Even if we are to decolonize Western narratives or any form of narrative just to undermine Africa, are we doing it, with, how can I say, with the full understanding of what it entails to do it, or are we just doing it out of activism, or are we doing it just not just for this generation, but for posterity? So when we articulate, how our responsibility should encapsulate or encompass different things or different scenarios, we will now have a clear vision and focus on how we can, forge ahead. Let me just buttress this again. I was listening to my Cameroonian brother when he was talking about how some media practitioners, because of ethical slackness, they indulge in different types of unethical behaviors that undermine their practice. So it rang a bell inside of me. I was like, even if one wants to, stay out of the shadows of such ethical malpractice, how can one assert agency as an individual? So that question rang a bell in my head, and I would like to address, or let me just capture that in this discussion. So as individuals, we face temptations, not only on a professional level, but our ability to really understand the consequences, especially the cost benefit of that particular action you want to take. If it is very, very high for you, even if it is slow, one thing that should click in our head is that it is not the way to go. And even if we are to take that particular course of action, there are consequences, even not even for yourself, but for the public we intend to serve. So that's how I can, capture your...
Thank you very much. Thank you for such an insightful speech. I now give the floor again to Ngala from Cameroon News Agency for your final remarks.
Okay, yeah, so just as I was talking about the what's the word I'm looking for now? The compromises that some Cameroonian journalists need to make because of the economic realities in which they live. I think what happens as a result is that it affects the quality of the journalism that is produced as well. I think in countries like in Ghana, in Nigeria, and South Africa, where I've spent some time as well, you are able to see how journalism, because it is independently funded and well funded at that as well, it is able to hold power to account, which is something that unfortunately we've not seen in Cameroon. And before the connection went off, I was just giving the example of we just had our presidential election results declared yesterday, and Paul Biya, who is the world's oldest consecutively serving non-royal leader, has won again in quotes, because largely media said in his that the reality that we don't in Cameroon because of the this sort of culture of patronage where everything is answerable to Paul Biya, even the media to a very large extent, where pre-elections we saw a lot of coverage that was pro-Biya, even from media that traditionally brand themselves as independent. I think I'm glad to say that Cameroon News Agency, where I work, is one of the few media outlets that is independently funded, and we are not pro-regime. Yeah, we take a lot of hard stances against the regime, and of course this means that we don't get funding from them as well. So, but that is a good thing, because it means we can speak truth without compromising on the core values of journalism, and that is why we are trusted. It just goes back, I think, to one of the things that Mr. Nosu was saying about the lack of trust in media, which we're seeing across the world. I don't know, rather it was my brother from the Nigerian News Agency who was mentioning about we're seeing a democratization of the media space, which thankfully we're playing that part as well in Cameroon News Agency. Because people trust us. Like CRTV is well funded more than us, but then they are seen to be the mouthpiece of the regime, because they never criticize them. They don't say anything that goes against the regime and everything, because of being economically tied to them as well. And so I think what this does is that it needs to make us start thinking of alternative models of funding for journalism. We need to start sourcing for to train journalists in other skills beyond just journalism. The truth is that the media ecosystem has evolved to the point where, let's face it, you cannot just survive just by being a journalist. It's not enough. You need to find other skills, even if it means teaching at some local university, teaching media-related subjects, or, being a consultant, media consultant, or a researcher or something. Find other ways that your journalism skills can be applicable in other spheres beyond just journalism, right? And also, I think sourcing for independent grants can also help journalists so that they're able to bridge that gap and not be able to feel that they should be beholden to politicians and always answerable to politicians, which ends up, like I said, compromising the quality of work that they do. So I think if we start thinking in this light, it helps the journalism space to address these ethical issues, which in the past has always just been seen like, oh, journalists should not at all take any money from sources or things like that. But I think while we agree that that is the case, it is a problem to take money from the, because I'm not saying that it's absolutely right. I think it should go on a case by case basis. For example, if you're covering somebody that was engaged in some sort of maybe child abuse or drug trafficking or whatever, and they try to give you kickbacks to kill the story, do you then do that? Which of course I think would not be right. that means that they're going to do it to some other person again, whereas your role as a journalist is to expose this. But if you cover some public event and you're offered something alongside the other journalists that are at the event, I think that culturally in Africa, I don't know about my Nigerian and Zimbabwean brothers, if that's something that updates there, but culturally it is something that for us is not a problem. But I also think that as a newsroom, we make it a habit that if journalists are being offered gifts beyond the scope of their work, they should make the editor know, so that if it is something that is going to bring about some sort of conflict of interest in the story, then the newsroom can decide how best to handle it. So in a nutshell, I believe that just copying and pasting Western models that say, no, don't ever take money from their sources, and trying to implant that in the Cameroonian or any other African context really wouldn't really work, because it misses the realities, the socio-political and the socio-economic realities of the people that are living there. Poor salaries for journalists, little to no protections, and so on. And these are things that need to be improved upon, and we would have to find ways to contextualize these ethical issues so that they fit in the African context, rather than just copying and pasting what others decided that works for their contexts.
Thank you very much. I was not aware of this cultural and ethical duality. I'm very curious, as journalists in Cameroon, do you offer gifts as well to your sources, to people you work with, or even any media partners? Or is it another sort of like a taboo for the sphere?
Oh no, absolutely not. I'm glad that, because I started working as a journalist in Cameroon, then I later did my training in South Africa after having worked in Cameroon for a number of years without any training. And I remember one of the examples that they gave us in ethics, media law and ethics class, was the example of the South African photographer Kevin Carter, who photographed the dying child in 1993 in Sudan, and later on the mental health issues and the guilt that he had, and he took his own life. And so, based on that example, what I decide to do is, I've covered stories where, at the end, maybe I'm covering a story about poverty or something. Like right now, we have an Anglophone crisis, which is in our part of the country, which is on the eastern border with Nigeria, and we have a lot of internally displaced people. So I remember some months ago, I had to interview a lady who is helping to house other IDPs. And when she shared her story with me, I took photos and everything. And then when I finished doing the story, I felt like, well, it wasn't right to just walk away. She had a baby and the husband was struggling and everything. And I gave her some funds from my pocket. But of course, I don't make that part of the story, right? My story is focusing on the fact that here are Anglophone IDPs who have fled conflict from their part of the country, and they're living in this other part of the country, and they're not able to cope with the situation there. But I think because we're human beings, journalists don't exist in a bubble. They're also humans, and the focus of journalism is people, And usually the reason you're telling a story is so that something should be improved upon, So if you're telling a story of that magnitude and you're in a position as a journalist to help, I think I see no problem with that. And so I did it in my personal capacity, but of course I wouldn't go and mention in the story and say, after interviewing this lady, I gave her such and such and such. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Now I would like to extend my sincere gratitude for valuable perspectives and expertise. This discussion has presented a rich tapestry of insights on dismantling colonial legacies in journalism and fostering authentic narratives. Well, my biggest takeaway is that we have to work together to collaborate in order to integrate the alternative narratives, and in order to get the news, the stories, firsthand from those working in the country. So we here at Россия Сегодня are open to any sorts of collaboration, are open to integrating new projects and to creating something new and valuable. I thank you very much, and I hope that we will continue this important journey toward a truly decolonized media landscape, reinforces the voices that must be heard in shaping our common future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much also.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.
For having all of us. Bye.
I wish you a very productive day.
All right.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Now what? Very good.